7 million years ago, a single moment changed the course of history. An ape-like creature stood upright on two legs, marking the beginning of a new chapter in evolution. Over millions of years, a new species slowly took shape. At first, these early beings still resembled apes, but something was different. Their brains grew larger, and they began crafting tools from stone. They learned to hunt large animals, discovered fire, and followed migrating herds for food, clothing, and shelter. It took 2.6 million years for hominins to learn to chip stones into pointed tips, the first true spearheads. But for nearly 2 million years afterward, the design of these spearheads barely changed. But then, only 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged. We quickly became the dominant species, wiping out the Neanderthals. And from that point on, something incredible happened. In just 30,000 years, humans advanced from making simple stone tools to launching space probes to other planets. How could we evolve so fast? The answer is, we couldn't. Humans didn't evolve at all. We were engineered, created to be the perfect slaves for beings far more advanced than us, who, according to ancient texts, descended from the heavens. These ancient stories appear in texts from around the world, in Sumerian tablet, Egyptian scriptures, Indian myths, Native American tales, and even the Bible. They all tell a similar story of gods who created and controlled humanity. It's the story of gods and men. It's the story of the Anunnaki. Mesopotamia is often called the cradle of civilization. Long before the pyramids rose over Egypt, and ages before Stonehenge was even an idea, the ancient civilization of Sumer was thriving. We have older sites like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, but these were small gathering places compared to Sumer, a vast empire that transformed the world. The Sumerians were the first to invent writing, create the wheel, and build sailboats. They revolutionized farming with the plow and an advanced irrigation system. They organized their society into independent city-states, each with its own ruler who reported to a king. They developed a legal code, understood complex math and astronomy, and their numbering system still forms the basis for how we measure time and angles today. Sumer emerged around 7,000 years ago, but here's a curious question. Homo sapiens have existed for around 300,000 years, yet it took just 7,000 years to go from inventing writing to landing on the moon. So, what happened in the 290,000 years before Sumer? Why didn't technology progress? Sumerian texts give us a surprising answer. Humans were busy working, but they weren't working on farms, building cities, or even hunting. They were working in the mines. And they were not mining for coal or metals. They were mining for gold. Gold is a unique metal. Its properties make it invaluable in modern technology, medicine, and even space travel. It's an excellent conductor, highly useful in electronics, and crucial to space travel. Gold can also be used for data processing and transmission. But before the 20th century, humans had no practical use for gold. It was beautiful, but otherwise useless. Why then would ancient humans dedicate themselves to extracting it? According to the Sumerian texts, humans mined gold not for themselves, but as a tribute to the gods who descended from the skies, the Anunnaki. But these gods were not divine beings. They were aliens from another world. Facing environmental catastrophe on their home planet, they arrived on Earth roughly 450,000 years ago, seeking one thing: gold, to save their dying world. If you are finding this interesting, please hit the subscribe button. There's so much more to uncover. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Anunnaki's home, a mysterious planet, is said to exist in the far reaches of our solar system. This planet, called Nibiru by the Sumerians, has been referred as the 12th planet, Planet X, and even NASA calls it Planet 9. Nibiru's elliptical orbit occasionally brings it near Earth, but this time it was about to bring a significant event that would change everything. The Anunnaki lived in a highly controlled industrial world. Their factories polluted the air, but they had the technology to deal with it. Skyscraper-sized air recyclers stood around every city. They were supposed to keep the atmosphere breathable. But then, disaster struck. Volcanic eruptions caught the Anunnaki off guard. Mountains erupted, spewing ash and toxic gases into the air. The air recyclers, overwhelmed by the floods of volcanic debris, began to fail. Within weeks, the atmosphere started to break down. Nibiru's ozone layer, already thin in most places, was now completely gone in others. The sky turned a sickly yellow. The 2 moons that once shone bright were now barely visible through the toxic haze. Stars that had filled the night sky were now completely obscured. The last brightest star disappeared behind the gloom years ago. In the city of Bu, the towering spires of ancient buildings loomed over empty streets. The gardens that once bloomed with exotic plants and flowers were now withered and brown. Formerly vibrant landscapes were barren and decayed. Anu, the ruler Nibiru, and his people were facing an impending environmental collapse. Despite having the brightest minds of Nibiru working tirelessly on solutions, the planet's decline seemed inevitable. The Anunnaki scientists had exhausted their resources, studying ancient texts and conducting numerous experiments in search of a way to save their world. Yet, time was running out, and their options were dwindling. In a moment of both desperation and brilliance, Enlil, Anu's son, discovered the answer: gold. The precious metal, rare on Nibiru, held a unique property. It could absorb and reflect harmful solar radiation. By suspending gold particles in Nibiru's atmosphere, the Anunnaki could create a temporary shield that would protect the planet from dangerous radiation and help stabilize its deteriorating climate. The Anunnaki mobilized every resource at their disposal and devised a bold plan. They launched expeditions to the far reaches of the solar system, searching for planets rich in gold. Their goal was clear: mine the gold, bring it back to Nibiru, and release it into the atmosphere to try to save their dying world. For years, probes were sent out, but they found nothing. The inner solar system yielded nothing but useless volcanic rock and toxic gas. Then, a glimmer of hope emerged. One of the probes reported a promising data: a planet with abundant gold and liquid water. This was a rare combination, and it was the 3rd planet from the Sun, Earth. The Anunnaki referred to it as Kai, and it was the perfect place for mining gold. But Enlil had concerns to share. Earth is teeming with life, including intelligent creatures, though still early in their development. These creatures are bipedal like us, but smaller than us, perhaps half our height. The creatures Enlil spoke of were under 6 feet tall. The Anunnaki themselves were 12 to 15 feet tall, as a result of Nibiru's weaker gravity. Aside from their small size, the Earth creatures were similar in appearance to the Anunnaki in other ways. The Anunnaki had larger eyes and larger skulls than the Earthlings, but the Earth beings had 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, nose, and mouth, just like the Anunnaki. Anu sensed concern in Enlil's voice. Do these Earth creatures pose a threat to us in our mission? They are primitive but violent. Some eat animal flesh, if you can imagine, Enlil replied. They have no interest in gold, but they may perceive us as a threat. They have no technology beyond wood and stone. Still, in numbers, they could be dangerous. That's what the Izizi are for, Anu said. The Izizi were a race of slaves who served the Anunnaki in all things, from operating the factories to maintaining order. They were an intelligent and obedient workforce, and they could surely handle primitive creatures their size. The council convened, the decision was made, and 300 Anunnaki and 600 Izizi were loaded onto great ships. It was time to make the journey sunward. It was time to reach Earth and save Nibiru. After a brief stop on Mars, the Anunnaki fleet finally arrived in Earth's orbit. The crew was stunned. The planet was a vibrant blue and green with swirling white clouds, and the fast, glimmering oceans seemed to go on forever. The planet was full of life in the sky, on land, and in the sea below. The Anunnaki marveled at Earth's beauty, but also felt sadness. Their home planet, Nibiru, was dying, and its people were suffering. But that sadness renewed their resolve. They were here for a purpose: to mine all the gold needed to heal their atmosphere. Some ships remained in orbit, carefully scanning the planet below, while others descended to scout for a suitable landing site. After much deliberation, the Anunnaki chose a fertile region between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, a land that would later be known as Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. Here, the conditions were perfect for their needs. The ships landed, and the Izizi were immediately put to work. The Izizi, a race of beings the Anunnaki had conquered long ago, were now enslaved and served their masters without question. They would carry out the labor, just as they always had. The Izizi stood between 12 and 15 feet tall, their immense strength unmatched. While humans have somewhat round skulls, the Anunnaki and the Aigi had much larger and often elongated skulls. These elongated heads are depicted time and again in ancient carvings and frescoes. The Anunnaki wasted no time setting their plans into motion. The Izizi were tasked with building the grand city of Eridu in just 7 days. This city would be ruled by Enki, the son of Anu. The Anunnaki were merciless in their treatment of the Izizi. The work was grueling, the suffering was extreme, and the task seemed impossible. Yet the Izizi had no choice but to obey. They worked endlessly, under constant pressure, to complete the city in time. Then the Izizi were forced to mine gold, day after day, year after year, for 150,000 years. And ships began the long journey back and forth between Earth and Nibiru. Enki, ruling Earth in his father's place, was pleased with the progress, but his demands grew more and more. He wanted more gold, and he wanted it faster. To make sure the Izizi worked harder and faster, slave masters armed with particle beam weapons were sent to supervise them. The Izizi were forced to work longer hours, with little rest, and if they didn't meet the Anunnaki's expectations, they were punished. Anu, though he knew the situation was dire, didn't want to push the Aigi to the breaking point. But the atmosphere on Nibiru was nearly gone, and he wasn't certain the gold would arrive in time to save their world. Despite his doubts, Enki pressed forward, demanding even greater output. The slave masters were ordered to use any means necessary, including torture, to ensure the Izizi produced enough gold. Soon, whispers of discontent began to circulate among the workers. They could not tolerate the unrelenting torture and the demands that never ceased. Soon, these whispers turned into shouts of defiance, and the IG rose up. No longer would they endure their misery in silence. No longer would they work the dangerous mines while being brutalized by their masters. The Izizi were not just physically strong, but also highly intelligent. They turned their tools into weapons, broke their chains, and fought back for their freedom. The city of Eridu became a battleground, and the gold mines collapsed under the force of the uprising. The Aigi fought valiantly, but in the end, they were overwhelmed and recaptured. Enki's brother, Enlil, was furious at the defiance. He wanted them executed for treason, but Enki saw things differently. The Izizi could no longer return to the mines. They had proven too rebellious. Yet someone had to do the work. Someone had to operate the mines and manage the labor required to maintain a vast city. Enki knew they couldn't use the Izizi anymore. So he proposed a new solution. In the forests surrounding the Anunnaki cities lived ape-like hominids. These creatures had large brains, walked on 2 legs, and could use simple tools. Though they weren't intelligent enough to meet the Anunnaki's needs, Enki believed with the right intervention, they could be made capable. Enki decided to take one of these hominid males and combine his genetic material with that of the Anunnaki. The goal was to create a being that would possess intelligence, but not so much that it could rebel like the Izizi. The new creatures would be strong, yet much smaller and engineered to be submissive, easily controlled by their masters. The first experiments were done in a lab, but the results were horrific. Instead of creating a perfect being, the genetic experiments created monsters: gorgons, cyclops, banshees, and two-headed giants. These monsters still live on in ancient stories. The Anunnaki changed their approach. They genetically spliced their DNA with that of a hominid female. Rather than using a laboratory to artificially grow the embryo, they decided to implant it into the female's womb, allowing the child to develop naturally. Less than a year later, a healthy child was born, a boy who resembled the Anunnaki in his physical traits, though smaller and more human in appearance. They named the child Adamu. Following the birth of Adamu, the Anunnaki created a female counterpart, Hea, to complete the new race they had begun. These two individuals would become the genetic ancestors of humankind, setting the stage for a new chapter in Earth's history. The Anunnaki needed these humans to procreate and create their own generations to ensure the labor force would continue without their direct involvement. Within a few centuries, the population of the new human race had swelled to the thousands. The Anunnaki watched over this new race for centuries. They taught them everything necessary to maintain their cities, build homes, farm the land, but most importantly, they taught them to mine gold. But here's where the problem begins. Humans didn't look like apes at all. They looked pretty much like the Anunnaki, just smaller. And human women were beautiful. One of these women caught the eye of Enki. Their relationship resulted in the birth of a son, Adapa, who would become the first of a new line of highly intelligent humans. This child, born of both human and Anunnaki blood, was far more capable than any human before him. His intelligence surpassed that of his peers, and with his sharp mind came a drive for knowledge, power, and independence. Adapa married a woman named Atiti, and together they began a new bloodline, one that inherited not only the Anunnaki's thirst for gold, but also a darker inheritance: violence. As the generations of these new humans grew, the balance began to shift. The submissive humans that had initially been created by the Anunnaki were gradually replaced by more rebellious and violent offspring. These intelligent and powerful humans, some of whom were capable of creating weapons and organizing resistance, soon began to pose a threat to the Anunnaki's carefully constructed order. The city of Eridu, once home to a manageable human population, was now overwhelmed. There wasn't enough food to sustain the growing population, and humans began to turn on each other. Violence spread rapidly, factions formed, and the once docile humans were now fighting for dominance. The Anunnaki watched with growing concern as their creations became more and more uncontrollable. Enlil was especially annoyed by the constant disturbance of humans. His solution was to send a series of plagues to reduce the human population. First came a drought, which dried up rivers and crops, followed by pestilence, which spread disease across the land, and finally, famine, which left millions starving. After each of these plagues, the humans appealed to the god who made them, Enki. He helped ease their suffering and return the earth to its natural state. By now, the Anunnaki had enough gold to heal their planet, and the humans had become a nuisance. With no further use for them, the Anunnaki expel humanity out of Eden and out of Eridu. But not all humans left. Some stayed and had relationships with Izizi. These unions did not produce heroes, but rather monsters. These offspring were a race of giants called the Nephilim. They were cruel and brutal. They tormented and tortured humans, and in many cases, they ate them. Meanwhile, humanity flourished. Small settlements grew into cities, and those cities became empires. Humans conquered every corner of the earth. But the human race was blissfully unaware of the impending disaster that would change their world forever. It began as a tiny star in the night sky, indistinguishable from any other. But as the weeks went by, it grew brighter and larger. Confusion spread among humans. They had no idea what they were seeing, but the Anunnaki knew immediately. It was Nibiru, their home planet. Nibiru's orbit around the Sun takes 3,600 years, and it follows a highly elliptical path, swinging far out beyond Pluto, nearing the Kuiper Belt, and then cutting back toward the inner solar system. When it does, it comes dangerously close to Earth, so the Anunnaki started packing. They had enough gold to heal their atmosphere. There was no reason to stay on Earth anymore. Besides, when Nibiru got close to Earth, they didn't want to be on the surface. This situation spelled doom for the human race. The Anunnaki knew exactly what was about to happen. After Nibiru passes by the Earth, there won't be any humans left. Among their leaders, there was fierce debate. Enlil insisted humanity had served its purpose and was now just a problem. A great flood was just what the Earth needed for a fresh start. But Anu, who had grown fond of humans, offered Enlil and other Anunnaki a compromise. The flood would come as planned, but one man and his family would survive. That man was Utnapishtim. He and his family would build an ark to preserve the seeds of every living thing. When the flood arrived, nearly all life on Earth was destroyed. But Utnapishtim, his family, and the animals on the ark survived. Each day, he released birds in search of land. One day, a raven didn't return. Following its path, they finally reached land, a mountain rising as the waters retreated. From this point, life, including humanity, would begin again.
Yes, this sounds like Noah's story. But this version, from the Epic of Gilgamesh, was written at least 3,000 years earlier, and the story is probably much older than that. And similar flood myth exist in nearly every culture on Earth. Each version mirrors the Sumerian story, just with different names. Humanity was reborn, but this time, the Anunnaki made some changes. They shortened human lifespans, made us more susceptible to illness, and made childbirth dangerous for both mother and child. This time, they would not allow human population to get out of control. Slowly, new settlements appeared, but humanity's previous knowledge had been lost to the sea. They were back to the Stone Age, yet the Anunnaki were struck by humanity's resilience and decided to intervene again. Enki and Enlil descended from the heavens and rose from the seas to give people the gift of civilization. They taught humans to read and write, to understand math, astronomy, and engineering. They were taught how to build great cities, and some say they guided the construction of colossal structures like the pyramids in Egypt and South America. The last time Nibiru passed by Earth was about 7,000 years ago. That time happens to coincide with the emergence of the Sumerian civilization, the first civilization on Earth. Sometimes, Nibiru comes so close to Earth that the planet is wiped clean. About 13,000 years ago, near the end of the Younger Dryas, Earth experienced the Great Flood. This coincides with the time when Nibiru would be passing by. Some believe a meteor impact caused the flood. Others believe it was a major solar event. But what if it was Nibiru that caused the ice sheets to melt and flood the Earth? What if that's the exact story that we've heard today? Some claim Nibiru will return around 2900, possibly close enough to cause catastrophic events, while others believe it may have a minimal impact. This is the story of Anunnaki, the so-called sky gods, from the distant planet Nibiru. This tale, both captivating and provocative, is at the heart of the ancient astronaut theory, popularized by the Ancient Alien series. The foundation of the Anunnaki story, as we know it, rests largely on the work of Zecharia Sitchin, whose 1976 book, The 12th Planet, claimed to translate these stories directly from ancient Sumerian texts. Sitchin's book became an instant sensation,
sparking a series on the mysteries of ancient aliens and their presence on Earth. But who was Sitchin? Sitchin wasn't a historian or archaeologist, but a self-trained scholar who dedicated over 20 years to studying Sumerian tablets, learning ancient languages, and unraveling the myths that now shape our understanding of the Anunnaki. Yet, Sitchin's translations are far from academically sound. They're interpretations at best. Even the word Anunnaki, which Sitchin translates as those who from the heavens came, was mistaken. In actual Sumerian texts, Anunnaki translates more accurately to royal blood or royal seed. These weren't extraterrestrial conquerors. They were regarded as descendants of the god Anu and his consort Ki, divine royalty in the Mesopotamian pantheon. Sitchin wrote in a time before the internet, when ancient texts weren't easily available to cross-check. Today, Sumerian language databases show that Sitchin misunderstood basic words, grammar, and phrases. Even his book's title, The 12th Planet, is based on a Sumerian seal showing the sun surrounded by celestial objects. Sitchin saw this as proof that the Sumerians knew of Nibiru, but in reality, they only knew about planets up to Saturn, the farthest they could see with the naked eye. There's also no mention of flying vehicles in Sumerian texts. Other cultures, like ancient India, describe flying crafts called vimana, but this has nothing to do with the Anunnaki. No Sumerian texts refer to spaceships or alien technology. And while Sitchin claimed the Anunnaki came to Earth for gold, the Sumerians barely mention gold in their writings, let alone mining it for another planet's atmosphere. Sitchin also called Nibiru a mysterious planet that passes by Earth every 3,600 years. But in Sumerian, the word actually means crossing, and was used to describe specific celestial events, not a rogue planet. Still, not everything Sitchin said can be dismissed easily. Myths about a great flood exist in almost every culture. Almost every group tells a story of a huge flood that wiped out most of humanity. Many of these stories describe only a few survivors, like Noah in the Bible, or Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. These cultures, which were separated by vast distances, somehow tell similar stories. Maybe they're all describing a real ancient disaster. Similarly, nearly every culture has a creation story where a god shapes humans out of clay or mud. Sitchin suggested that this might be an early version of genetic engineering, with clay representing early hominids and essence, meaning DNA. Although science calls Sitchin's theory pseudoscience, his idea of humans being genetically altered has a strange parallel in modern genetics. In 2020, scientists at the Max Planck Institute found a genetic mutation in a gene called TKTL1 that makes human brains grow neurons much faster than other hominids. This tiny change in one gene gave our ancestors an advantage that made us different from Neanderthals and other early humans. For nearly 300,000 years, early humans didn't make big advances. Then, suddenly, around 50,000 years ago, they started inventing, creating art, and building societies. This new gene might explain how Homo sapiens suddenly took over the world, while Neanderthals faded away. While Sitchin's idea of Nibiru has been largely debunked, scientists in 2015 found evidence of a large, unseen planet far out in the solar system, which they suspect affects the orbits of other distant objects. This planet, sometimes called Planet 9, might fit Sitchin's vision of Nibiru, though it's still unproven. In recent years, elongated skulls have been found around the world, especially in Peru. DNA testing in 2014 showed that some of these skulls have genetic traces linking them to the Middle East, which is surprising. Researcher L.A. Marzulli even suggests these skulls might belong to ancient human hybrids. These elongated skulls are still a mystery, and it's unusual to find Middle Eastern DNA in the heart of ancient Peru. The flood stories, the sudden jump in human intelligence, and the mysteries around human evolution still puzzle scientists. It's possible that something or someone flipped a switch in the human brain, giving us our intelligence. Whether this happened naturally or through some outside influence, the mysteries remain. Whether or not you believe in the Anunnaki, one thing is clear: our origins and early history still hold many questions we've yet to fully answer. If you have felt that this video might have raised your curiosity in humanity's past and made you wonder about the hidden truths in our ancient texts, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button and click the notification bell to discover the wonders of our ancient texts. The answers might just surprise you.